We crowned a regular season champion, the Auburn Tigers, your SEC regular season champions, which, as we have discussed, if you're going to say this is the best this conference has ever been, and maybe the best conference in the history of basketball, this is going to be one of the best teams we've ever seen play in the SEC.
Yeah, I was going to say, man, I mean, I think we might be sleeping on how good this Auburn team is because we talk about – I think everybody is in agreement this is the best conference in college basketball, at least right now in the here and now. But for this Auburn team to be 15-1 in conference, 27-2 overall, in the way they win games. I know they went through that short little stretch that Stephen joked with us about last week, Stephen Pearl, that, hey, man, these games have gotten close. What, 2 or 3 of those games? Everything else is a blowout, including Saturday against Kentucky.
Yeah, it was I thought they would lose the game, Lance. I'm going to own it. I was wrong. I thought Auburn would lose the game. I just thought Kentucky, they needed a big win like this. Auburn hasn't won there since 1988. I just still wrapping my head around the fact that a team, and as good as this conference is, could go through this thing 17-1. That just does not compute. I know Auburn still got to win 2 games to do that, but still – I really thought 14-4 would win this league. If they are able to do it at 16-2 or 17-1, that is just remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, the reality of the situation is it is all about, what you do in the tournament. That's how you're remembered. So, we'll see how Auburn plays once we get to the NCAA tournament. But right now, I mean, I try to rack my brain. I look back, those Arkansas teams, I guess the ones in the early 90s were SEC. Calipari had a couple of the Kentucky teams. Patino had a team or 2. But I'm just talking about best regular season teams I've ever seen. Like maybe the last one I can remember is, I don't know if they were this good, but Anthony Davis, that team, was that in 2012?
I see the years confuse me, but I do think that was the year, the 2012 Kentucky team.
It was 12 when they
lost to Wisconsin, right?
No,
the year?
No. Was it?
Or was either way.
I thought the Anthony Davis team closed the deal. I'm pretty sure they did.
Okay.
Yeah, they won the national championship.
That was the one that Calipari got.
But that was over a decade ago. So maybe in the last 10 years, this is the best regular season SEC team we've seen. You go back to Florida, the back-to-back 06-07. But just the last decade, this might be the best we've seen. And when Janai Broome hurt his ankle earlier this year, we discussed, how good would this Auburn team be if it was long-term. I said, look, I think they still have the talent. They can make a Final Four run. I think it showed, Broome plays, 31 minutes on Saturday, 9.6 rebounds, 3 of 7 from the free throw line, 3 of 9 from the field. Has arguably.
If I'd given you that line, you would have thought the final was won.
Yeah, and they win by 16.
I know, that's what's
in
crazy.
Rupp, a place they hadn't won since 1988. So my point there is, even when Broome is not getting it done, this team can still win convincingly.
Yeah, I was blown away by that performance by them. And the fact that Auburn had not won there since 1988, I obviously put too much value in that. I just thought it was a place that sometimes you just get those places where it doesn't come together for you for whatever reason. Clearly, I put too much value in that. If you had told me, though, Auburn was going to a place they never win and Broome had only scored 9 points, I would have guaranteed you Kentucky won that game.
Yeah, now if I would have told you Miles Kelly's going to go for 30.
Well, that would have been another piece of information I would have liked to have had.
Multiple threes banked in. How often do you see that?
No, and it was one from each side, right, that he banked in, yeah. I mean, it wasn't just shooting from that one side.
I mean, occasionally up against the shot clock, somebody will force it, and you'll see one bank in. But a guy that can actually shoot it, who hit 9 threes and 2 of which were off the glass, pretty insane.
So Auburn wins. They win the SEC regular season champion, which as good as this conference is, I don't care if the regular season champion were Auburn or Alabama or Tennessee or Florida, which are the 4 best teams in this league. I think the regular season champion ought to be the overall 1 seed. I feel like Auburn has locked that down. My name's not Joe Lenardi.
No.
I'm not on the selection committee, but I feel like Auburn has locked down the overall number 1.
I do too. Now, look, it could get interesting if Auburn, and you tell me which world we live in where this would happen, if they were to lose to A&M, to lose to Alabama, and then lose their first game in Nashville, and then they're sitting at 27-5. They're still a 1 seed. Maybe they're not the number 1 overall.
I personally believe, and again, not on the selection committee, never have been, but I personally believe that 1 line is set before a ball's ever even tipped in a conference tournament.
I don't know if I agree with you. I think normally it is, but I think this is a year when you look at Auburn's going to be a 1, Duke's going to be a 1, Houston's going to be a 1. Then if Alabama, Tennessee, or Florida was to win this tournament, I could see that being your other number 1.
Maybe in that case. I guess I was talking about as far as the overall number 1 seed goes. Let me clear that up then. Yes, you're right. With the fact that that last 1 spot, which, by the way, I mean, we'll get to Alabama in a moment, but that whole game, they're playing for a 1 seed here. I'm like, that's what your guy Joe Lunardi has said. He really doesn't get to see this tournament. I thought that was a little over the top by the ESPN crew there.
Well, and I'll tell you, there was not a lot of drama in that game. I mean, for the final 37 and a half minutes, Auburn led. Yeah. They led by as many as 22. That game was never in doubt.
No, it was never in doubt. So I think since you're probably going to have 3 teams playing for that final 1 seed, Alabama, Tennessee, and Florida, if it does come down to that, depending on what happens this week, maybe you're right. Maybe what happens in Nashville determines that last 1 seed. I just personally believe that when the horn sounds against Auburn and Alabama down in Auburn, and Duke and North Carolina and Chapel Hill over the weekend, I think the selection committee will know who the overall 1 is. I don't think it will have anything to do with what Duke does in their tournament or what Auburn does in theirs. That's just my personal belief.
Well, this would make it a little interesting. Let's just say that Auburn splits with Texas A&M and Alabama. That's not going to surprise anybody.
Not a terribly unlikely scenario, no.
And they don't win the SEC tournament. I just wonder if going in, if the committee does wait because, hey, let's back up. Auburn's got, at that point, 3 losses. Duke's got 3 losses, but Duke did beat Auburn head-to-head.
That is a factor now. That was back in December.
It was, but because here's the way it would – I mean, if Duke wins the ACC championship, Auburn doesn't win the SEC, Duke beat them in the regular season, I would think, therefore, Duke's got to be number 1 overall. I think Auburn is a better team. Don't get me wrong here. Much more difficult gauntlet, but the fact of the matter is they did play. I know it was in Cameron, but Duke did beat them in the regular season, and if all the other credentials are the same, I wouldn't be shocked if the committee did it that way.
Yeah, the head-to-head is interesting. I mean, I have a hard time when you've got a 30-some-odd game sample and you're going to boil it down to one head-to-head on somebody else's floor. To me, that's not the way I would seed a tournament, but I've never seeded one either. And I don't know. I did find out, and we'll get to this in a little bit, because I looked this up this morning. Because, as I said, during the Alabama-Tennessee game, they kept telling me this was for a number 1 seed, even though maybe somebody on the selection committee told them that. But I felt like they overplayed that a little bit, that we were playing for a number 1 seed there between Alabama and Tennessee.
I think it's too early.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't know how you feel about this, but Tennessee drops another game. Alabama drops another game. St. John's and or Michigan State wins out. I'll be interested to see the rankings today when they come out, because Michigan State's now won 4 consecutive games. They're really creeping up. They really jumped up into the top 10 last week. St. John's wins their first Big East championship since the early 90s. Both of those teams are going in the right direction. Alabama coming off, a stunning loss the way it actually went down. You just wonder if Alabama falls behind both St. John's and Michigan State.
They may in the polls. I don't know. But here's your problem. Are you talking about in terms of them?
I'm just talking about if they were to. I know right now where the metrics are, Alabama is in front of those 2 teams. I'm just saying if St. John's goes on, doesn't lose again, wins the Big East tournament. Michigan State wins the Big Ten tournament, doesn't lose again. Alabama absorbs another loss or 2, and the same for Tennessee. Could one of those teams creep up there?
Right now, Michigan State in the NCAA's net rankings is 11th. So that's a no on that.
Yep.
St. John's is even worse. They're 19th.
Wow.
You want to know how crazy the net is? St. John's Saturday won their first conference championship, outright conference championship. Do you know the year?
In 92, right?
Outright. 92 was a tie, apparently. I was unaware of that. Outright since 1985, Lance. 1985.
That's only 40 years ago.
It's only 40 years. I was like, man, I was in 3rd grade at Sachs Elementary.
Well, and that was our first expansion to 64, right?
Yeah, I mean, they have not won an outright conference championship since the tournament expanded.
Do you remember who won the national championship that year?
In 84?
Well, 85, right?
85 was NC State, right?
Nope.
Was that 83? That was 83.
Yeah.
85.
84 was Georgetown.
Georgetown. Who was 85?
Villanova, upsetting Georgetown.
Oh, that's right.
Because didn't they shoot 76% from the field?
Yeah, but that was the last game before the shot clock. Did you know that? Villanova played a pre-shot clock era game plan.
And that was the last season before the three-point line, I think.
Yeah, maybe it was.
Or maybe that was 86 or 87.
Both those come in at the same time, 3-point line and shot clock.
Yeah.
So, St. John's won their first outright conference championship since 1985. They dropped a spot in the net. They went from 18th to 19th.
That's crazy.
Well, now Seton Hall's awful, so it didn't help their strength of schedule. But, I just don't see any way that either one of those creep up. I think Auburn, Duke, Houston are locks at 1.
Yep.
Florida, Tennessee, Alabama are probably the only other 3. Like in the net, if you just go by the net, you tell me if these feel like 1 seeds. Your next teams after Bama are Texas Tech. Does that feel like a 1 seed to you? Gonzaga?
Nope.
Iowa State?
Nope.
Arizona?
Nope.
And now we're to Michigan State. So I think it is between Florida, Tennessee, and Alabama.
I don't know if Florida can win out.
Well, I don't know that Alabama can.
I don't think Alabama will. I don't think Florida will.
Yeah.
Because I think Bama could beat Florida, and then Bama turns around and loses to Auburn, right?
Yeah, or could lose to Florida and beat Auburn. I mean, neither scenario would surprise me right now.
And then Tennessee.
Tennessee's got Ole Miss and South Carolina. They got the easiest stretch.
Yeah, they do. Now they got to go to Oxford. I don't know what kind of Ole Miss team you're going to get. Boy, they've been inconsistent. But, yeah, you figure Tennessee's going to beat South Carolina just going through the motions.
Yep. Tennessee's got the best setup going forward. Who's Florida's last game? Do you have it?
Florida's last game is Ole Miss in Gainesville.
Dang, Ole Miss got a tough finish. They got to play Tennessee and Florida.
Yeah. Good thing they already locked it up.
Yeah, I mean, they're trying to get a better seed. They finished with Tennessee and Florida. Jeez. Do you remember when Tennessee and Kentucky used to play the last regular season game of the SEC every year? And
Yep.
it always had a lot of meaning.